Adjunct Professor Moran, Macroeconomics, 111. In our last session, we explored how the government could return the economy to full employment if it was at a recession or if there was inflation. It could drop spending. It could do this if we were short of full employment GDP by not spending the entire 510 to 490, but by causing the aggregate expense line to shift by increasing government spending, in which case buying would be greater than making, and that disequilibrium would cause businesses to produce more because of an unplanned inventory decrease. So the business would realize they could sell more if they made more, they'd hire more workers, unemployment would fall, income would go up, and consumption would go up. But it wouldn't go up dollar for dollar because the marginal propensity to consume is less than 1. We used the marginal propensity to consume to determine what the spending and tax multipliers were, and we discovered that the spending multiplier was 4. So the government, using the formula change in GDP equals change in aggregate expenditures times the spending multiplier, the government would only have to, one of the components of aggregate expenditure would only have to spend 5 to take us from 490 to 495, a disequilibrium where buying is greater than making, and then the invisible hand, businesses hiring more workers, would take over and consumption would rise back to where buying is equal to making. But a change in taxes would have to be larger. The tax multiplier is less. That's because a change in government spending buys output, but a change in taxes is a transfer payment. So the first round in a change in taxes doesn't count. So using a similar formula, change in GDP equals the change in taxes times the tax multiplier, we discover that the change in taxes would, of the same amount of 5, would only change GDP by 15. We wouldn't make it. Notice that 4 and 3 are a factor of 1 off, and the factor that's missing in a change in GDP of 20, if each factor is 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4 5s is 20, one factor of 5 is missing, 20 to 15. Now let's focus on the balanced budget multiplier. Let's discuss what a balanced budget is. Government spending is represented by G. Taxes, how the government earns money, is represented by T. In any one year, a comparison between government spending and taxes will result in a deficit, where spending is greater than taxes, a surplus, where taxes are greater than spending, or a balanced budget, where they're equal. The government spends 100, taxes 110, there's a surplus of 10. The government spends 100, taxes 90, there's a deficit of 10. Now, the debt, where is the government going to get this money? One place they could get the money for a deficit is to borrow it, and that's what the public debt is. The deficit is a one-year difference between spending and taxing, and the debt is an accumulation of prior deficits. So if the government spends 100 and taxes 90, they have a deficit of 10, they have a debt of 10. If the government spends 120 and taxes 100, they have a deficit of 20, and now they have a debt of 30. A balanced budget is when the government spends 100 and taxes 100. Balanced budget. There are some people who feel that the government is irresponsible with its money and is chronically running deficits. So there are some people who propose a balanced budget amendment. Now, the problem with the balanced budget amendment is that if we are trying to use the government's power to restore our economy from, say, recession to full employment, you'd want to either increase government spending or decrease taxes. So if we read a balanced budget, you would increase government spending to 110 and decrease taxes to 90 and run a deficit. Economists say that it's okay to run a deficit in the short run, as long as when the economy is returned to full employment, you pay it down. On the other hand, if we were facing inflation, we run a contractionary fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is G and T to solve economic problems. From a balanced budget of 100, you would decrease spending and increase taxes. And by taking money away from people and reducing sales to the government, GDP would fall back to full employment. And here we'd have a surplus of 20. But if there's a balanced budget amendment, if we're facing a recession and we increase G from 100 to 110, by the law, by the amendment, we'd have to match that increase in taxes to 100, 110. The problem is this increase in G is expansionary, but the increase in taxes is contractionary. They're fighting against each other. Will they completely offset each other? No, because the spending multiplier is one larger than the tax multiplier. So in our prior example, the marginal propensity to save was 0.25. The spending multiplier is 1 divided by the marginal propensity to save. That turns out to be 4. The tax multiplier is a negative marginal propensity to consume divided by the marginal propensity to save. 0.75 divided by 0.25 is negative 3. Notice the difference between these two numbers are 1. The balanced budget multiplier will be 1. So, if the government stimulates the economy, aggregate expenditure should be 5, and that would cause GDP to grow by 20. But the tax multiplier, which is swinging the opposite way, would cause it to contract by 15. And so you won't make the full 20. You'll be short by 5. So the balanced budget multiplier of 1 means that if we are short of full employment by 20, the government has to spend the entire 20, which is not practical. The government's ability to control the economy would be lost, although the government would be compelled to run balanced budgets and we wouldn't have such large deficits.